All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board for the board. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to episode 107 of... I couldn't remember if I'd hit record. Then I'm like, where's my fucking thing? All right, 5, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to episode 107 of the KissFAQ podcast. I'm your host today, Julian Gillen. I am joined by Ken, 69th Blizzard, and Marcus Almighty. Mark, welcome back, gentlemen.
Greetings.
Before we get into the first part of our discussion today, we're taping this on Thursday the 19th, so obviously tomorrow is an incredibly important day in American history. You just don't get days as important as tomorrow too often. But it is, of course, Paul Stanley's birthday. So everyone at the KissFAQ would very much like to wish Paul a very happy birthday, Star Child. You are still the best frontman in rock and roll for me. Simple as that. And, of course, everyone out there will have probably read that Paul got himself a bit of a concussion while skiing earlier in the week. So, hopefully you're okay, Paul, resting up, being pampered by your family, because skiing and personalities does not always go well. Obviously, I'm thinking of Sonny Bono and Michael Schumacher in more recent years, Formula One driver, of course, who is still not in good shape following his head injury. So, take care of yourself, Star Child. We want you around for many years to come. So, happy birthday to you. Let's move on to another member of the band now, briefly. And Gene Simmons. He's the gift who keeps on giving in so many ways. Gene joined Ralph Sutton and Zach Amico on a recent appearance of the SDR show. I'm just going to let the clip speak for itself, and then we'll just talk about this briefly.
Kiss has been around since forever.
43 years.
Right. And boy, do I look good. 43 years.
Yeah. 43.
At this point now, what inspires you to continue? Like you did, Monster was a couple of years ago, great record. I loved Hallelujah, great song. What inspires you guys at this point to just keep that Kiss train rolling? Besides, obviously, the money and the fans, to create new albums and do that. Where do you find that inspiration?
That's less of an incentive because downloading and file sharing, people have convinced themselves they don't want to pay for stuff. And last time I checked, Kiss is not a charity. We're philanthropic, but I'll be the one that decides how much I give and where. I don't want some college kid to decide, you have enough money. I don't want to pay for your record. Okay, then go download a Radiohead record and see what happens. No, I ain't about that. Make a distinction between commerce and philanthropy. So the idea of doing another Kiss record, unless and if there's a financial model that works, personally, I'm not interested in it.
All right, so Gene Simmons, not interested in doing another Kiss record unless there's a financial model that works in his favor. That's... I gotta say, there's too much butthurt going on in that because he just... Even Metallica got over Napster. I mean, for fuck's sake. So Ken, what's your initial impression on him saying that? Because I did just grab a few things. They talked about Monster. Okay, Monster. 3D lenticular cover. International Tour Edition. Whatever. Limited Deluxe Edition. Copies of the fucking record over there.
Vinyl.
So how many copies did, the remaining core of fans buy of the last Kiss record, and it still didn't sell worth shit? Simple as that. Their legacy, they're done. So what's your take on that, Ken?
Well, he is just, I'm at a loss for words, but he is just still on his own thing about the people stealing music thing, and he had to jump in and say, well, I'm not going to, make music if they're going to just download it and take it for free. And, he'd be lucky when they started off, they were putting out their first album, they need to get back to that mentality of just put out. They didn't know how much they were going to sell back then. They were doing it for the love of, of playing music. And, so, they wanted to make a lot of money at some point, but come on, give me a break. And then so he was the one that wanted to do albums for a while. He kept saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to do another album." And then Paul kept saying no. Now Paul's saying yes, and now he's saying no. Like, what? Come on, just get on board. I think it's just his way of saying, stop downloading and this and that. Now he talks about the college kids stealing music and stuff.
Yeah, like they're listening to
Kiss.
Kiss.
They're not even listening to Kiss. Okay, and if they are starting to get into vinyl now, vinyl keeps growing. More and more college kids are buying records now. They may come across and buy an album. So hey, if you put out a new vinyl, maybe they'll buy that based on buying some of looking, getting interest in Kiss, or, if nothing else. So come on, just get over it, and like you said, Metallica got over Napster. He just needs to get over it. I mean, he's got, he's not going to lose money, first of all, and secondly, he's got a ton of money. So what's the big problem? Just make some music and do it for your fans, who's your number one boss, not the person who goes to college and downloads. Think of your fans when you're making their music.
Money is his god. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, the word that immediately pops into my head when he finishes talking like that is he's so goddamn obdurate. It's like, are you just incapable of getting past the 1999 argument? Or whenever the Napster thing was, and it's still the college kids. These sound bites in the Gene Simmons echo chamber just make me want to puke. Mark, you're an artist. You're someone who actually makes music. You're a creator. Your opinion to me is more important than anyone's on this panel. So what's your take on him?
Well, excuse me. Jeez, I almost choked on that. The thing that really bothers me about this is that he's missing one fact, and of course, being a musician and the kind of musician that he is, he would never openly admit this. The fact of the matter is that Kiss are not really a huge band as far as people buying anymore. I mean, he's saying no, people are downloading, so I'm not interested in doing it. Well, there are lots of bands out there that are still selling records now. There is a turnaround. They even said on the news lots of times, and lots of different media sources I've seen, that vinyl has totally, went up huge percentile in sales. And, maybe it just hasn't gone up for Kiss because, as much as I love Kiss, and I wouldn't be doing this podcast if I didn't, the fact of the matter is they aren't selling nearly as much records as other bands now are. They can't compare with bands like Foo Fighters or something like that. They just outsell them, thousands to one, And that's part of the problem, I think, and he won't, of course, admit that because that would admit defeat, and Gene Simmons is not about that. But, on one hand, I kind of, as a musician, you want to get paid for what you're doing. It's like, somebody, who's a bricklayer, he goes out and works an 8-hour day, and then they just tell you, oh, I just don't feel like paying you. I'm sure you would be pissed off if somebody did that to you at your job. Just take any job that you're at and imagine that situation. But, they've been doing lots of things to tackle this. Like you said, Julian, there's been many different types of releases you can get, deluxe editions, Blu-ray versions of records, vinyl. There's all kinds of ways that you could make up the loss of the downloading.
Right.
And if they took advantage of that more often, which they don't, and like I've said in many episodes before, like, why don't they make some video of them in the studio recording, add it as a DVD to their new record, and people like me would go out and buy it in a heartbeat. I want to see this kind of stuff. Give people incentive to buy your stuff. It doesn't only have to be about the music. Nowadays, it's about a lot more. People add in live stuff. People add in studio stuff. People add in like a bunch of stuff. You had a bunch of great ideas, Julian, as well, when you left us that note about the episode today. Like, put in a golden Willy Wonka ticket for a meet and greet. The one person who gets in five CDs, put it in there, and people will be hunting for them everywhere to try to find that to have a meet and greet.
I just sell Kiss, Kiss and Willy Wonka, the fucking golden ticket in the Wonka bar. I mean, why has Kiss not done that? They've done the platinum card, in 87, 88, or maybe it was late 86, get into any Kiss concert forever for free. Oh yeah, only valid until we change management. Oops. But thinking back to some of these acts, Radiohead, they released, what was it, In Rainbows in 2007, and initially it was just a download. So you could download it and pay what you wanted. Here's the catch. Most people paid nothing, is what their analytics came out and actually figured out. 0. But they still went on to sell something like 3 million copies worldwide of that album. A lot of it obviously was to do with the press at the time that came out with it. But more recently, Foo Fighters, people love them or hate them. I'm sorry, I'm on the love side because I just absolutely adore Dave Grohl and what he represents for rock. And now that Lemmy's gone, and Ronnie James Dio's gone, you're kind of left with Dave Grohl. No one else is filling that niche. They gave away the Saint Cecilia EP, which is the follow-up to Wasting Light. And some people are the follow-up to Sonic Highway. Sorry. Some people are going to say, well, yeah, because I wouldn't fucking buy it, you better give it away free because it was shit. I thought it was pretty good. And then on Record Store Day, it came out on vinyl. So, the model is still working. Getting back to Metallica, they, got over their hump. You can now, I get emails from them after buying an AT&T show, AT&T Park that they did in San Francisco with the Super Bowl last year. Every show they do goes up onto Metallica. Pearl Jam did the same. Obviously Kiss did similar with Instant Live and all that. So when we're talking about new revenue streams, Kiss and Gene Simmons, to me, seems to become like the American airline industry of trying to get a leg over and absolutely hump the living daylights out of absolutely every revenue stream possible. They've done it for their, their live concerts, by the microphone, by the pick, by the guitar. Here's a stage played guitar. Here's a stage played drum snare. Here's my fucking ass hair off the toilet seat. So now the mentality kind of goes into the recording industry. Well, where are my revenue streams coming out of, the effort that we put into creation? Well, Gene Simmons' creative process, I think we discussed in the last episode, is a bit shotgun approach. He throws a lot of shit up on the wall and not all of it sticks. So where are your revenue streams, Gene? Gene, you've already invested the time and effort. You've written hundreds, if not thousands, of demos of songs. You've got the work there. What are they doing for you in terms of your revenue stream? Are they going to be a baggage fee in the overhead compartment, or are they going to be, here's your free bag of peanuts? Because right now they're not getting you anything. They're getting you peanuts. So, Gene, don't tell me that there's no financial reward for making new music. You've already spent money. You're not recouping any of it. I mean, Mark, what does it cost you to create? It takes away time from other things, right?
Yeah, that's one thing.
Not all of it works out. I sit for hours on my guitar, and I'm not even a working musician. I'm doing it for fun. I'm doing it for pleasure.
Right.
Yeah.
Is Gene? Is there no joy left in his life musically?
Maybe. I mean, that could be part of it, because one quote that I've always held close to my chest that I heard, and it comes from a musician that I was very surprised who said it, Nikki Sixx, is that artists make art, right? And, if you're a musician, you make music. It doesn't matter, that's just in you, If you're thinking about more the monetary end of it all the time, then maybe you're not as much of a musician as you think you are. Because, for me, I just enjoy writing songs, just like I'm sure Julian enjoys writing it. That's why we do it. We go and we get up, we take our guitar, write something. By the end of an hour or two, we might go, oh my God, this is shit, and throw it out. But it was still fun trying to do it, right? And then other times you come up with a gem and you're like, great, this is working out well. When the record I just finished doing now, it took me almost 2 years of recording and writing stuff. And, of the 12 songs that I have over the 2 records I'm going to put out, there were more songs that got tossed out as well that I listened back to and said, well, you know what? This just isn't as good as this stuff, so why bother keeping it? I don't want to jip people off, but that's just it. It's about doing it. It's about it being fun. And I put up a song for free on Garage. What was that place again? Bandcamp, and put it out for free. And I said, people, if you want to download it for free, they went and did it. And some people even paid knowing full well that it was available. So don't tell me that people sometimes won't do that, because if they feel that they enjoyed and they feel it's worth their time and they enjoyed it, they will plop down for it. Just like maybe when these bands release full records, I think the thinking behind that is you listen to it, you like it so much that now I want to fully invest myself in it. I want a physical product of this now. I just don't want it on my phone anymore. I want to have the vinyl now. I want to have the CD in it. But you might not have gotten to that point if you didn't have it there to listen to beforehand, because some people are cautious with their money, right? So it helps, right?
Yeah, here's a good example. My buddy Jonathan in town turned me on to a band called White Wizard, and I checked out their stuff on YouTube. Next day, right, I think it was during the week after I'd listened to it a few dozen times, I'm like, fuck, I gotta have that. You know, listening to it on YouTube is not the same as purchasing the physical CD for me. Obviously, opinions do vary, and some people live and die by their iTunes libraries. But I was like, I want that CD. I want to have it up in my CD rack, you know, because I always want to be able to recover the music that I like. And I really dug that shit so much that, you know, I ordered it, you know, or ordered some Merciful Fate, you know, for fuck's sake, and King Diamond. I mean, you know, I can listen to it all on YouTube. But can you create a playlist easily out of that shit? Can you load it up on your phone, put it in your car, etc., etc.? No. So, you know, he's a Luddite. He does not understand technology. It's like talking to my parents about their AOL accounts. Yeah. That kind of says it all for Gene.
Yeah.
That he does not get it. And here's another thing with the Radiohead. You know, while most fans chose to pay nothing for it, the publishing arm and management were monitoring the average price daily, and they were prepared to cancel the download if the overall average paid price became too low. They didn't cancel it, you know, until it had run its course and had been released physically. So that speaks volumes for how far you can go in terms of teasing online, using technology to your benefit. Because think of the audience that you get. We published, and this was Tim interviewed Paul Green, and I apologize for butchering his name there, about Kiss sales when he was, you know, doing his news admin thing as, you know, co-admin on the FAQ. And Kiss's SoundScan figures are nothing impressive. Obviously, we're going back to 1991, mid-91, I think SoundScan starts, through, I think we were 2013 when Tim did that. And I think it came to about 12 million, under 12 million catalog, plus all those albums in that period that came out new. So Revenge, 500K. Alive 3, 500K. MTV, 500K. So we're nearly to 2 million right there just for those albums. So the back catalog does not move a lot. So I really don't think Gene has a healthy view into his own, you know, kind of area of the industry in terms of what Kiss sells. This is not Casablanca Records, where you're finagling a 4 solo album advance to get 4 times the solo, the advance, which obviously is going to be recouped by the label. You're getting 4 times the advertising budget sent to Howard Marks and all that shit. So he's still living in the 70s in some ways. Yeah. So, you know, I think what I want to say is recording a new album and doing something online is just so totally geared for Kiss, and it's something that they've never done properly. Sonic Boom. Do you remember those video clips of them working in the studio and trying to match up what Tommy... A lot of them were Tommy on guitar, Eric on drums, you know, a little bit of Gene and Paul behind the board. Remember Kissology, the Easter egg from Carnival of Souls? How people ate that up and said, where's more? MTV Rehearsal, Unplugged Rehearsal, you know, DVD. You know, people love that shit. And here's my idea. A pay site. Put the paywall in front of it. Kiss fans, for while the band are recording an album, they say we're gonna start the process for Kiss, whatever number studio album it is, and and you're going to have to sign up and pay monthly. But in there, you're going to get video blogs. You're going to get behind the scenes. You're going to see clips. You're going to see us working on songs. You're going to see Paul Stanley with a 12-string guitar working on a song that he then turns around and says, "No, that's not working. That doesn't fit the vibe of where we're going." You know, shit like that. It's otherwise stuff that is all done in the creative process, right, Mark? You sit with your guitar, you noodle around, you're like, "Oh, that's a nice chord progression. Oh, fuck, it's not working. Okay, it doesn't work with the melody I got in my head. Okay, move on. To go on to something else. Or here's Gene Simmons. You know, I've got 89 hard disks full of demos and samples. I'm going to Kirk Hammett it up and put together a Metallica song made out of 19 different components, you know, make Delia Smith throw up from the amount of ingredients in there, and sell it to the people. You know, do it in a format that they can't easily download, number one, because you can then package it all up on the DVD and fucking sell it in one of these numerous editions. Why are people downloading that? I mean, here's my question. I'm going to go to you, Ken, first. Do you think people still download and don't support their artists because the artists are doing bonus tracks for Europe, bonus tracks for iTunes, bonus tracks for Best Buy? Do you think that has an effect, that there are too many different products being sold of the same album, say, and they're feeling that the artist is disrespecting them by giving exclusives to all these dozens of... I mean, how many copies of Kissology did we have to buy to get the good bonus discs? Stuff like that.
Right. I don't think that it really affects... I mean, just from my standpoint, if I'm into that artist, I'm going to get it, you know, I'm going to get the regular U.S. version. I may buy a Japanese version that comes out and has a couple extra, you know, things on it, songs on it. That's if you're in that mode of supporting the band. It's just about the music or just collecting that group. I don't know. But for me, yeah, it doesn't bother me. I don't care. They put something out, and I kind of understand it. There are different markets out there in the world, and certain countries have gotten different things. Like I remember Creatures of the Night, you know, had that etching on the one side or the signatures.
Yeah, the UK 12
and
inch.
the other, and I have that. So I got all that stuff, and you know, I had no problem buying it. I was like, you know, you're still going to be able to get it in this day and age. So it wouldn't bother me.
I like the pull-out tongue single for a Killer.
I have that.
Killer, I think it was. Yeah. So it's been done historically, going back. I mean, Monster. Look, Japan initially got what I think it was King of the Nighttime World Alive cut of that was their bonus track. Later on, when they went on tour there, they got the International Tour Edition with Right Here, Right Now, which was also a bonus track for iTunes. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's nothing new. With Kiss, it has traditionally only been one song, if that. You know, you go back to Killers and there was a totally different, you know, track list for Japan and Australia. You go to Smash, has had a different track list for England, with what the fuck, those two dreadful Crazy Night songs, you know, because there were hits there. So, you know, it's not been something that's common. I mean, You Wanted the Best had New York Groove, Got to Choose on MTV Unplugged. Europe, I think Kiss My Ass had Die Arts, or however you say it in German. Apologies. It has to sound more aggressive than that as a name.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is Kiss has never fully explored the airline industry-ification of their album releases. You know, they haven't had a ton of different versions going. Well, where can you buy records in America now? Virgin's gone. Best Buy is pretty much.
HMV?
I haven't seen an HMV in years, so I don't know if they're I don't know if they're still around. Fuck, I haven't been to one since Glasgow in '97.
In our neck of the woods, they have still HMV. I mean, just one thing I'd like to just put in really quickly too, when you're talking about if people are willing to support the artist, I fully support it. And one of my most fondest memories back in the late '80s, for example, was when Def Leppard came up with Hysteria. They had back then cassette singles, right? And I remember when those came out, I used to love getting those because they had different artwork for each one, and because there were so many different singles that came out of that, you also had all these great B-sides that came with it too. So it was almost fun in itself going out to buy all those, and I got all of them. I have them somewhere in my closet, but I got all of them, and I got the record, and I got the vinyl, the CD, and and that's the thing. If you like it, you will buy it. So my only comment to make to Gene Simmons is that if you want people to buy your stuff, make it good. Make the record good. If the record is good, people will buy it. If it's shit, they're not going to go get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but look at those B-sides for Hysteria. I'm sorry, I don't think Kiss has ever had throwaways like Tear It Down, throwaways like Ring of Fire, throwaways like Ride Into the Sun, 87, that abomination.
And it's also because they hadn't had a producer like Mutt Lange behind the board helping them for who knows how long. The last time you would compare, the closest you can compare to a Mutt Lange is obviously like a Bob Ezrin, and he's only done limited amounts of stuff with them. So there you go, right?
But with all the stuff they've done demo-wise, why the hell not? I mean, I totally agree with you. And that was the cool. I was collecting those as well when it came out. It was even in England around that time. I was like, I found a 1/9 square that was different than anything else from all the other ones I had. So, I think I got to 8/9 of the album cover replicated with those 7-inch singles. It was absolutely insane. And Kiss has never done anything like that. I mean, I think the closest they come is the solo album singles in Britain, which, isn't saying a lot. So, I think Gene's gaslighting the whole state of everything, and I just wanted to throw that phrase out there because that's the word du jour, gaslighting. Everything's being gaslit. But, Gene, step away from the accounts. Step away from your bank balance for a minute. Pick up that fucking guitar. Pick up an acoustic. Because we know who you are, Gene. The real Gene. Just start playing. My uncle is a raft. Or my mother is the most beautiful woman in the world. Or
that's right.
Turtle Soup. Or
Eskimo Sun.
Eskimo Sun. Go back into those early 70s demos where you are basically... You're Paul McCartney wannabe, and remember the music. Remember what you were trying to do, what you were trying to express when you were doing that. You weren't thinking, well, maybe you were thinking about getting laid, but I don't think you were thinking about your revenue streams. That you could sell each guitar string to a Kiss fan for $95 off that guitar. And well, fuck, guys, I guess you could sell. Here are the strings that we were using while we recorded such and such a song. So. If it happens, it's my fault and I own it. So sorry. So get a pay site. Let the fans vote on track list. Vote on album names. Vote on what songs they want. Give them demo samples. What demo do you want us to record? And if it's a Gene Simmons one, what demo do you want Paul Stanley to rewrite for me? There's just so much fun that could be had in a pay site that could then be done. So I obviously got to be in my bonnet over that, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll podcast episode. Check out the full episode of their podcast because Gene does give, some pretty funny responses in there. And the guys, Ralph and Zach are, they're entertaining. It's a good podcast and well worth checking out. So go there, find it, Google it. I don't know if I'll put up a link for that. So any final thoughts on that before we move on into today's topic? I feel like we've just gone all three sides with a very long preamble before we actually get down to our... You want to talk about Motley Crue?
No more thoughts about it. Yeah, no more. Yeah.
God.
I'm sorry. Okay, Motley Crue conversation. Too Fast for Love, Shout at the Devil, and that's it. End of topic.
You know what? I agree with you.
And MC94 as a completely different band. So,
the Leather Records version of Too Fast for Love is the best.
Fucking hell, yeah. So, sorry. Okay, that's enough Motley Crue.
My opinion.
If we have a conversation about Motley Crue, we have to skip every other line, just like Vince does when he sings. Okay.
Oh, gosh.
So today's topic actually is not Gene Simmons, and it's not about the recording industry. It's not about my opinions. Ken, KISSters albums.
Yeah, KISSters albums. I was just thinking about it, and I know there's albums that I think of as sister albums. We have Holy Trinities and that kind of stuff, but this is more of sister albums that were released consecutively. Two albums that were released consecutively that are similar and kind of they go together. And what are they? And what are the best sister albums out there? Which are the two best that of all the sister albums? Now I came up with six sets of sister albums. I don't know how many. And you guys might have a different view on sister albums, but I'm going to guess for the most part we're all going to be on board in the same idea. You don't think so? Okay. The other ones that are not sister albums I consider just they're orphans.
But there's also records I think that could be sister ones that are not released consecutively, and I'll get to that when it comes to my turn.
Well, that's
exactly. That was what I was kind of thinking as well. So Ken, why don't you kick us off with the first of your sister albums and tell us why you think what makes them a sister album?
Okay. Well, the first sister albums, set of sister albums, and now this is no particular order, but I'm just kind of going chronologically anyway. It's Kiss, the first album, Kiss, and Hotter Than Hell. I believe, even though the production is pretty different from the first to the second one. It's somewhat there, but it's the style of music between the two albums. Some of those songs could have wound up on the first album that were on Hotter Than Hell, because they were available and they were on the. So, for instance, on the original demo, I want to say "Watching You," I think was one or something, right? So those two to me go together. Versus if I couldn't put Hotter Than Hell and Dressed to Kill together, there's no way a sister album to me. They don't work together as far as I'm concerned. So. My first set is Kiss and Hotter Than Hell. They're sister albums. They go together.
Yeah. I don't know about that. I mean, I get you on Watching You. When I think about those two albums, my head has a problem with the completely contrasting sonic styles of both of those albums. That's my problem. I mean, Watching You obviously dates. It's on the Whitman demo. It could have been a contender for the first album, but Parasite, Got to Choose, that stuff all comes later, kind of in the catalog for me. But I just can't get over the difference in sound, where you have the first Kiss album is just a glorious piece of platter. It's close to perfection in terms of sound. It's a fantastic sounding record, and then you got to pile in a couple of gallons of earwax into your ear. Got to hit yourself in the head a few times. You get the sludgy, grungy sound, which it's endearing. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I do like the sound of it, but it's just so different. Mark, what about you?
Well, I can see where Ken comes from with that theory. Basically, what prevents it to be a full sister record for me is the same thing that you mentioned, Julian, is mainly the production. Now, I present to you this question. If they would have stayed back in New York, did it at Bell Sound, did everything the same way, and recorded it, would we have a closer sister record? I venture to say yes, because, Let Me Go Rock and Roll was in their set for a long time, even as far back as the beginning. Like we said, Watching You was in there. You have Going Blind that went back even before that. So there are traces of stuff that could be connected in that way. But the main problem is the production. Because they went in, dicked around, wanted to become, some pseudo Black Sabbath sounding record there, then I think if they just would have left well enough alone and let those guys do what they did the first time around with the second record, we would have had a good sister record.
Yeah, and that's something for me when I think about a sister record. I almost think of part A and part B. So, you get Judas Priest, and they're originally, they're planned for twin turbos, which would have kind of all that material. Most of it ended up on, turbo and ram it down. But with some other stuff, was supposed to be one piece of product. So you kind of have a continuation of the theme, the sonic idea, kind of the writing style spread across 2 releases. Use Your Illusions, probably an even better example, or God help me for saying it, Load Reload.
Oh yeah.
So those to me are closer to my idea of a sister album. I'm going to jump in immediately and give you the first sister albums that really came to my mind were Animalize and Asylum.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's the era I get into the band, so it's the one that's most firmly tattooed on my brain. And everyone's saying he's talking about fucking Asylum again. Someone take him off the air. Asylum, if nothing else, is a continuation of exactly what they were doing in Animalize, which is trying to be Motley Crue, Wasp, and Bon Jovi, basically rolled into one band with a lot of latex, sequins, bad wigs, and fluorescent shit.
Yes.
But the main differentiation between the two is the quality of Gene's stuff. So Paul Stanley's material, I think, between the 2 albums, if you take it and you playlist it all together, you get a very kind of unified feel out of all of those songs. You got the up-tempo rockers, you kind of got the slower melodic stuff. Gene's, you have Shit Sandwich, slightly less Shit Sandwich. So, because this just simply isn't his best era. He's got some good parts in some of the songs that do stand out, but he's really not fully invested back into what he's doing. So, for me, with their dreadful covers, sister albums.
Yeah, I agree. I have that on my list also, Julian. That was another pair of sister albums. So that one we have a match on. And I agree that, Animalize they're similar style-wise, at least, like you said, Paul Stanley. But the second, they improved on it, fortunately, and did a better production, I believe, on Asylum. Much better. But yes, like you said, both album covers are bad in their own right. But yeah, those are sisters.
I might well say that I think Asylum's production might be Paul's best. So.
Yeah, well, I think
Probably.
I think that you're pretty close to it. I mean, I think another thing, the way I kind of look at these two, it's like the good-looking sister and the kind of bad-looking sister in this one, because I think Asylum is like, the record I love, so that's the good-looking sister, and Animalize is kind of like it's like she got all the bad genes out of the deal, one, because I just feel that besides The Heavens on Fire and a couple of other songs off that record, it's not really so great. Whereas to me, Asylum is much stronger in writing. But like you said, the premise is what makes them the sisters record, because they're trying to go for the same goal with both records. They're trying to mine the same, field there for results, right? And I think that definitely makes them sister records in that way. A big glaring difference, though, between the two sisters is one is dating Mark St. John and the other one has Bruce Kulick, right? So I think that Bruce Kulick had the better sister out of the deal. And, to me, it's just more musically pleasing, Asylum. But like you said, they are sisters in that sense. The goal, I think, is what makes them the sisters in this. What they are trying to achieve with those records, they're very similar in that. And I think Asylum just ended up, in my opinion, got there better. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Animalize sold better of the two, right? Because of the single, right? Heavens on Fire, it went double platinum, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a interesting thing there with the sister. Doesn't mean that the good-looking sister always ends up with the better result, right?
Yeah, it didn't get to double platinum, but they were kind of parroting that it was at 1.8 million at one point. God knows with accounting what it really sold. I think, I've always felt that Animalize benefited more from Lick It Up than Asylum benefited from Animalize. I think a drop had happened by that point that officially, anyway, Asylum, I believe, is only gold certified by the RIAA. Yeah. Whereas, obviously, in Kiss's advertising PR material, it's a platinum album. So, there's always going to be a little bit of a, they're doing their numbers by by Neil Bogart methodology still. So that one for you, 5 for me, or 20 for me. Whereas the RIAA does, things a little bit more, specifically.
Professionally?
Well, yeah, accurately maybe. I mean, who the hell knows? I mean, it's just no way to really know, and that's the whole idea, I guess. That it's like your box office receipts. What would you call a sister record?
Okay, so I'm going to give you my first sister record, and I kind of hinted at it when we first started about how I don't think that they have to be necessarily back-to-back releases to be sister records. And to me, I don't know what you guys think of this, but I feel very strongly that Destroyer and The Elder are sister records to me.
I knew you were going to say
because,
totally.
Well, because in a lot of ways they are. Yeah. Elder being a concept record, and Destroyer a lot of the ways is in a way always being kind of looked at in that light as well. A lot of people made the theory that, in a sense, if you were to break it down, you could always come up with a sort of story theory behind that, like concept with Destroyer as well. They had the same producer. Who did the same kind of tricks, orchestrations here and there on both records. They were both records that had a vastly strong reaction from the buying public, the Kiss buying public. They were both albums that signified a big change in direction for the band. So in a lot of ways, all these things are very similar. They're almost like twin sisters, in my opinion, in this way. And they also had records. They were also records that had album covers that were talked about. One in a very great way. People love the Ken Kelly one. And then the other one where people kind of were scratching their heads going, what does this cover mean? But again, it still got people talking, whether it was because it was great or whether it was, what the heck is going on here? So in a way, sisters again, that way, and again, in another way that they're interesting in sisters is that Destroyer had session players that we didn't know about till later, and same with The Elder, right? It was, Alan Schwartzberg on drums doing some stuff and other people popping in here and there to do stuff. You had Lou Reed appearing to do help with things, and he was rumored to do this and that and who knows what else. But those two, to me, are obvious sister records because of that. And Bob Ezrin is the main linchpin tie in it, right? That he's the one who made those, I think, so close in relation.
Yeah, I obviously kind of wrote a little bit about that and completely agree with you that, basically The Elder is Bob Ezrin re-recording Destroyer in 1981, right down to the style of songs, Blackwell, God of Thunder, Detroit Rock City, The Oath, Flaming Youth, A World Without Heroes, Beth. I mean, for fuck's sake, the introduction, the outro. Yeah. I mean, just calling it a concept, totally across the span, they're sister albums. I can't fault you on that at all. The only one's got the crumb horn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
We're going to have to do another episode on the Odyssey. There's so much more to dig into. Ken, what's your thoughts on Mark's?
Well, I kind of thought that's where he was going to go, though I didn't. I thought about that as possible, and I see where you're coming from. But I have a hard time because the songs are so different from each other on those albums. And maybe that's my big point with it. The songs are so different from each other. Maybe the production's there, a lot of the like you said, the techniques and tricks and so on, and doing a concept more or less on both. But it's just they're so different styles that I couldn't do it. I couldn't put them together.
Yes, but you're also a fan from the 70s, whereas I'm a fan who got in on the 80s, so I can never have that ground floor kind of perspective. Everything I do is revisionist in so many ways because I wasn't there. So it's kind of hard for us Asylum guys, who got into, we got into the fucking band with Asylum,
Yeah.
We got into the band, it's better late
At
than
least
never.
you got
people.
into the band.
Yeah, it's like
at some point.
It's like those people who say their families came over on the Mayflower to the United States. Well, my family didn't come over on the Mayflower, but they came over as soon as they could. So, there you go. Sister albums, and I want to throw in one that I just think is a great one according to Mark's model, and throw stones at me, but Crazy Nights and Psycho Circus. Both
somewhat, yeah,
completely over-polished, overcooked,
True.
overthought, over-everythinged, and just kind of clusterfucks in the background. Here you have Crazy Nights, which is a great idea that, we're going to wait for the right guy who's doing the right thing with the right people, reinvigorating people's careers, and then it comes around and look what they actually release. I mean, is no one sitting there going and telling Paul Stanley, Paul, perhaps you don't really need to bring back the elder singing style, for My Way. You're singing higher than Jim Gillette from Nitro. All the glass in the studio is breaking, and those things are all pegged in there. All the monitors are pegged in the red. You just don't need to go there. Then you get to Psycho Circus. And again, they're overthinking. They're trying to kind of second-guess themselves, second-guessing a market, second-guessing everything, and just ending up walking into walls. So it's not really on the material. It's more down to the production, that they put the wrong producer in the wrong situation. I think they did Ron Nevison a great disservice by telling him exactly what they wanted and him perfectly delivering what they wanted and completely skinning the cat. I mean, they took all the fur off that thing. It's emotionless music. Yet, and I've said it again, and I wish I could play these for people, but, it's just one of those things that they exist, they circulate, but they cannot be played. The demos of Crazy Nights, the demos of, Turn on the Night, When Your Walls Come Down, just sound so much better for the style of material as well. It doesn't sound like Poison to me. It doesn't sound like shit. They sound like decent rock songs that with a harder edge and a more gritty, gangy chorus rather than these hyper-polished, hairsprayed songs that Bon Jovi and to a certain extent Def Leppard were doing with Hysteria. It's un-Kiss-like. Mm-hmm. So then you fast forward to 1998, and they so polished down every element. I mean, didn't they realize in 1998 that what Kiss fans wanted the most was something that sounded like the originals, not something that sounded like the Ultimate Sin? People didn't want Bruce Fairbairn to polish the living shit out of stuff, and he was a good producer. I mean, you just have to listen to listen to Pump, which is probably the last half decent Aerosmith album in terms of Aerosmith.
Aerosmith,
yeah. It's the last really good sounding album that they have in terms of its sonics, even if there are songs that show them starting to lose the plot, on a personal basis. That he was just the wrong guy given the wrong instructions. So those are two very sad stories for me, Crazy Nights and Psycho Circus, that make them perfect sisters in, misery.
Yeah, I think another thing where they share sisterhood really quickly is both of them were heavily hyped before their release. As watch out, there's a big Kiss record coming out, Crazy Nights. They were really trying to get people excited about that, and people were really excited about Psycho Circus coming out when it was all talked about. And both of them, I think, didn't deliver on the hype. Especially Psycho Circus. I mean, mainly because I think people clued into things a lot quicker because it was already, the 90s and, the internet was up and rolling. So rumor mill was afloat, about things. And back when Crazy Nights came out, it was just there wasn't so much that they were hiding anything, but it was more like they were expecting a certain album from Kiss, I think, at that point, and were surprised to get what they got. Such a highly glossed, the ballad almost sounds like something Hart could have done, and it's just
exactly
like you said, Rod Nevison being an amazing producer who's done so many great albums like Ultimate Sin and stuff like that for Ozzy. When you hear those records and think of the things that he's done, you get excited and don't expect a record like Crazy Nights. Just like when I heard that Bruce Fairbairn was going to do, Psycho Circus, I got excited because, some of the records that he's done before too. And I mean, some of the records that I think he did, was it afterward? No, I think it was before. No, it was after. He did like Yes is the Ladder. And that was such an awesome album that he did with him. It was a record that Yes actually got excited about and what decided to continue going forward and making more albums. It was because of that record, because he had such a great time doing it. But that result never happened with Kiss. Paul Stanley was at odds with him all the time with that record, right? And that's the problem. When you get a producer, let him do his damn job. Don't keep stepping in and overstepping him and saying, no, I don't want that, I don't like that. You hired him for a reason.
Yeah, they set him up. And I don't think they did him justice. But, Ken, let's get back to your original intent for sister albums, because Mark and I have taken it completely off on a self-serving tangent.
That's all right. But I see where you guys are coming from, and it does make sense. Though all mine are back to back in some fashion. So back to me. my next sister albums is Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. Mm-hmm. Those two, to me, that's got to be on most everyone's list as a sister album. They come out, after Destroyer. Rock and Roll Over comes out, and it's a great rockin' album, produced by Eddie Kramer, and they were going and they were rocking out and they were doing well at that point, back to the Kiss sound. And then Love Gun, though it's similar in somewhat writing styles, more so. I mean, Gene was pretty consistent between the two albums. Paul was developing a little bit more just before his solo album stuff, but it was still good and rocking stuff. And of course, you have Ace on it, and for his first song, but that's not going to break the two albums apart for me. They're both produced by Eddie Kramer. They both sound pretty darn good. Of course, it got a little bit more polished on Love Gun. It's too bad that it doesn't stay more with the Rock and Roll Over production, but it's close enough. And those two go together. They're back to back, close in years, 76, 77, and they're both solid albums, pretty solid. Rock and Roll Over being the better of the two, in my opinion, but they go together.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you on that. It's kind of like the discussion on the first two albums, that the production between the two is what kind of kills it for me in calling them sister albums. Right. Love Gun is almost the Crazy Nights of the originals era in terms of its sonics. That it's polished the edge off the sound that the band had. Eddie completely perfectly captured Kiss's essence on Rock and Roll Over. They basically cut it live in Star Theater, or wherever. So it's generally recorded live, and then the overdub's done, and it completely grabs the sound. Love Gun, on the other hand, it doesn't have that grit for me.
Well, another possibility I thought of, if I was going to break it up and not do back-to-back years, which is my original intent, I would have went with Rock and Roll Over and Ace Frehley's solo album as sister albums. Sonically, to me, those are more like sounding sonically than Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get that. I also think that Paul songs on Love Gun sound like Paul's song on his solo album as well, for that matter. Tonight You Belong to Me. Very similar in that Paul kind of takes exactly what he's learned from Eddie Kramer and puts it into practice. Now, I'm going to go back to Mark's model on Love Gun and say that I think Love Gun and Dress to Kill are much more sister albums for me, because they're both so polished and condensed.
I can see that.
Mark,
where you come from.
Mark, yes. I hate to interrupt your reading.
Mark's reading a novel.
No, I was just going through here just because in this book.
Excuse me.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Getting behind the mist.
It was
25% off too.
Yeah, and it's actually Gene Simmons in there who actually said it himself, that he said that these are sister records. I was trying to find the exact quote that he said in there.
Which ones? Yeah. Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun?
Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun were sister records. He even mentions it right in this. I was trying to find the direct quote, but I know he says it in there that he thinks that
Gene
they are.
and I are on the same wavelength on that one.
But it is interesting because of all the points that Ken brought up. Similar producer. I think the mentality was also the same. I think that they thought, whatever worked for Rock and Roll Over could probably work for Love Gun. They did try to push Ace to do a song for Rock and Roll Over, if I'm not mistaken, but he never got around to it. So that would have made it even more a sister record if that would have happened. But
yeah,
there's a lot of elements the same. But then I also see what Julian's coming from with it too, that I think at that point, they had a handle on the writing again. They knew that they weren't going to write anything like Destroyer material, so they weren't, worried about the writing. But I think they probably went back and said, okay, let's try to make it sound a little bit more polished. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they were, not that they were unsatisfied with the sound of Rock and Roll Over, but I think they just wanted to progress that part of it. And that's why I think it ended up being a little bit more polished. I love Rock and Roll Over. It's my favorite Kiss record, period. So nothing about that record is bad, And it's very funny that Julian brought up Love Gun and Dress to Kill, because I was going to say that was my other sister record as well, because I see the great similarity in that as well. I mean, tone, as funny as it sounds, they to me sound more similar to me than Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun does, because whatever Dave Whitman did with Dress to Kill, it has that very dry, clean, in-your-face sound, and Love Gun sort of has that with a little bit of affecting here and there, but it's just something about those two that sound very, very similar to me in there, and I just really like the sound of that record. I think Dress to Kill is the best sounding one of the three. His first ones. It's not my favorite of the three, but I think it sounds really fantastically done. Like I said before, I gave Dave Whitman all the credit in the world for his work on that for that record, because he could have took something that could have been a complete disaster and made it sound really good.
So here we go, Ken. Let's go to the elephant in the room. Do you have Dynasty and Unmasked on your list? Yes. Okay.
They're sister albums. I mean, this is going for the pop, I would guess you could call it just more AOR rock on Dynasty, and then going into a power pop rock on Mask. Though they're so similar. A lot of the writing styles are similar, background vocals similar. Of course, the production is Vinnie Poncia. The same producer, so you're going to get a lot of the same things. So those are just, I can't break those apart. Those two don't sound like anything else in their catalog. They go together.
Yet one of those albums is so much better than the other. That's kind of the tough point to fathom. That there's so many similarities between them, but Dynasty is, in some ways it's perfection, and you might almost be able to, draw parallels more with Alive 2 and maybe Love Gun, in terms of that it's still kind of softer on the edge of rock, highly polished, but the skills that have gone into that material, I mean, fucking hell, Ace on Dynasty. And what he brings is, to me, is just a paradigm shift in the band's sound.
Okay.
That you've got, one of my all-time favorite songs, Save Your Love.
Yeah.
And Hard Times. But, I always thought if Dynasty, they should have released a different song as the lead single other than I Was Made for Loving You. Plus, I think I Was Made for Loving You should have not been the lead-off song on the album. It should have been somewhere deep in the album, maybe even the last cut of the album. I would have rather had it there. I think it would have went over better with their Kiss fans who are coming home. They get the new Kiss album expecting a rock, and here comes I Was Made for Loving You. And like, what? What are they going? So I would have put that on the end of the album. And it's kind of funny. Like, I've told the story before. When I got it out of the box on the day it was released, pulled it out of the carton at the record store. It wasn't even on the rack yet. I pulled it out, bought it, went home. I looked at the back of the cover. I saw, I see Charisma must be the first song. So I just quick glanced at the vinyl. I saw Charisma, threw it down. I listened to Charisma. I thought Charisma was the lead-off single of that album, and that's where I listened to it that way. That was the first way I listened to it. Second side first, and then the first side second. And I thought this was awesome. And but then it turned out, hey, wait a minute, this is really side 2 or what? So I think it would have went over well better that way.
You can never have that first impression back again. That's your first impression. Charisma.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
I love it too.
Maybe if I Was Made for Loving You wasn't the first song, people wouldn't call it a freaking disco album. Mark, what you were going to say?
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
I was going to say one thing that I find very, very interesting about this. I had a discussion about this once in regard to the Rush catalog. Now, what I find vastly different between Kiss and Rush is that where we're talking about sister records with Kiss, it seems like they do a record that's good, and then the next record after that kind of it goes down a bit. Right. Then they do another record, it does pretty good, and then it goes. Now the thing is, with Rush, I found it was the total opposite. Debut record was okay, Fly By Night awesome, Crest of Steel okay, 2112 amazing, awesome. Farewell to Kings pretty good, Hemispheres killed it, Permanent Waves really good, Moving Pictures wow, and I find that that's why Rush ended up always progressing and just getting better and better and getting more and more, and they stuck around and kept their audience for such a long time. Whereas with Kiss, I always found they went up and then up and then it just seemed like their progression just went so staggered with it. Even with this situation, Dynasty, they come out. I love Dynasty. It's their number 3 record, from their catalog. It's amazing, great job. Like I said before, it reminds me of New York City. Every time I put that on, close my eyes, I can see like New York downtown. It's a great record. I love it. Then you put on Unmasked, and you're like, I can see New York, but now I'm thinking more like Queens Boulevard or somewhere different. It's not downtown anymore. It's like somewhere out in the suburbs or something. It's just something really odd. And the funny thing about it that I saw in here, not to quote the book again, Vinnie Ponce is quoted as saying, "Why did we do popular songs on Unmasked? Well, those were the kind of songs that Paul was writing. It wasn't my idea to come in and change anything." So
really?
Don't blame Vinnie Ponce on that. Apparently this is what Paul Stanley wanted to do. So there we have the answer as to why, Unmasked went the popular direction. Apparently that's the songs he was writing, and that's what they wanted to go in.
Look what he was doing at the time. Alessi Brothers, Desmond Child, New England. Sure. Come on, he Studio 54. What was Paul Stanley's life in 1979? And where was he getting his kicks musically? I'm kind of, if you're hanging with the Alessi Brothers and playing some guitar on their stuff, it's no wonder that kind of softer, safer, kind of more melodic stuff is starting to creep into your psyche. You're suddenly thinking about your songcraft a little bit more, thinking about what the fuck do I want to dance to, rather than what do I want Gene Simmons to be spitting blood and shaking sweat all over the stage to? He's on a different stage. He's on on the dance floor. So you got the Saturday Night Fever image of Star Child walking down the street, not the growling demon. So it totally makes the context makes complete sense of why they kind of do what they're doing. I mean, come on, keyboard players. There's a great interview with Holly Knight that just came out with what is it, Rock Pages. Got it. Go to the FAQ. Look at the. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So, Holly Knight. It was trending high up on the page for a while. Oh, is it dropped down already? Yeah. So, I got it. Rockpages.gr. So go over to the FAQ message board and check out the Holly Knight interview, and it's Greece's Rock Pages web magazine. And the little excerpt that I have read so far, very interesting. So. Sorry. And she, of course, was in Spider with Anton Fig.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, but if you think about it, though, too, Paul was in the Studio 54 stuff, too. He mentions it in that book, too, for the Dynasty era as well, right? And I mean, it's funny that he was in that kind of vibe for both records, yet one is vastly stronger than the other.
Yeah, I think he's trying to do different things. Yeah. In 1979, he sets himself a goal. I mean, it's been written about, and he's told the story that's probably gone from, mythical to legendary, and has very little to do with how he originally, kind of sat down. I wanted to write a song with a certain amount of beats in it, just like at the disco. Yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah, paint that a bit thicker. I think he set himself a goal to make a danceable rock track, one that was very Kiss, and that sounds a little bit more bland in kind of its expression than saying I'm trying to do, whatever the hell he says he's trying to do. Whereas with Unmasked, he's trying to do something different. I mean, he's trying to be something he's not, in many ways. I mean, come on, he's trying to be the softer side of Joe Walsh and Bruce Springsteen, kind of getting into the singer-songwriter kind of vibe with a lot of his stuff. Even though there is material that is good, it's more experimental and more kind of dangerous to their roots. I mean, it's almost like going into Destroyer territory again, going completely antithesis to what they really are. So, again, very, very good. I mean, that's one of the most obvious kind of sister album pairings, Dynasty and Unmasked. What's next up, Ken? On your list.
All right. Well, the other one, the next two are Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up.
Really? You actually pair those two together, even though they're so.
I did.
Again, it's like it's like the first album and Hotter Than Hell to me, that the sonics are so vastly different that I couldn't call them sister albums, even though Meredith plays such a central role to both of them. What's your logic behind those?
Maybe it's more, I don't know if it's a sentimental time or something. I don't know what it is, but it's Creature of the Night. Yes, it was clean sounding, but still hard rock, and the big drums and so on, and the music style was more aggressive again. And I just think Lick It Up was the next step, going, kind of pushing it to trying to be even more aggressive in their songwriting, and the more, to me, it's more of a, like I said before, and I know some disagree, but I think Lick It Up is more in your face than Creatures of the Night. It's my sound. It's more in your face.
Thanks a lot.
And I like Lick It Up. I think it's one of my favorites. It's not better than Creatures, but it's up there. It's one of my favorite albums by Kiss, and I still think they go together. To me, sonically, it's close enough, and maybe it's the time period where they were, back to back, and I was really into it at that time. And maybe it has to do with seeing them live with tank stages.
Don't go there.
So, I don't know.
You're a horrible human being, reminding us Asylum guys about the Creatures and Lick It Up tours. Man. You're just mean.
It's a really interesting thing to say, in my opinion, because as I had to check my pulse there after you said that, Lick It Up was better and greater sounding than Creatures, I was like, wow.
Well, I didn't say it's greater sounding. I said it's more in your face, the sound, the production, in my opinion.
But you know what? I can, look, this is the thing that makes Kiss great, is that we all have so many vastly different opinions,
right,
and that we can talk about this and we can have things to talk about for the next 10 years as far as Kiss goes, right? But I think it's interesting. I mean, lots of people do kind of see that kind of connection to it, that, if they would have took off their makeup beforehand, would there be more connection to it? If they would have left their makeup on and did Lick It Up, would it be more who knows, right? There's so many ways that you could look at it. But I mean, to me, it's the songs and the production. I think the production on Creatures of the Night is more bombastic, obviously, and it has those drums. I mean, that's the thing that really separates them as far as I'm concerned. And I mean, sure, Vinny there has more writing credits on Lick It Up than he does on Creatures, but I still think Creatures is a better album overall. I like it better, I think, from start to finish. I can leave the needle down on the record player and have no problems about skipping anything, right? And I think that's telling, because if you have to skip something, then it's not as good as you think it is, right? And I mean, the ending of Lick It Up is where it loses it for me. Those last couple of songs, where I start getting a little bit like my fingers kind of, do I want to reach for it? Do I want to take it off? I'll leave it, But yeah, I can see the connection. I actually have a different sister one to that, but I'll leave it until after.
Right. Well, I think I'm gonna probably throw in the most obvious of recent ones, and that's Sonic Boom and Monster. Hard to think of them in any other terms, but a continuation of the same theme of My Way or the Highway. It's the Paul Stanley guided missile that the material is all going through the Star Child's filter, and it's not making the record unless he's completely happy with it. And I think to a certain extent he gives Gene a few passes, particularly on Sonic Boom, and less so on Monster. That they sound very similar. Similar enough. I think the production on Monster is a step down, and there's Sonic Boom is certainly nothing to kind of like put up on the holy altar of wonderful production. Sonic Boom is not sonically pleasing. Simple as that. Brick wall to fuck, it compressed to hell. It sounds like a fan in the background. It's but a lot of that comes after what Paul Stanley does as producer. So a lot of those faults, it's like Death Magnetic and how bad that sounded, rather than, say, And Justice for All sounding as bad as it does because of Lars fiddling with knobs that he shouldn't be allowed in the same room as. The only knob he should play with is his own, and nothing to do in the studio. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean...
When you let a drummer take a bassist out of an album, you're just taking the whole bottom end out of your fucking album. It's like, what the hell are you doing, drummer?
Doesn't make sense.
Just get back, go and hit something.
Yeah, it is funny though how much damage you can do with a compressor and a limiter in the mastering stage of a record. I mean, having done it myself and having mixed records and having mastered ones for bands, I'm very weary and leery of that, and making sure I have the spectral analyzer up and frequency reader, and making sure that I'm not, turning it into a big sausage waveform after when it comes out, because that is not good when you have it like that. I mean, even though there was a Rush record like that, the Vapor Trails was heralded as being the most terrible sounding Rush record ever. And then when you put the wave up, it just looked like the solid block. It's like, what the hell? There's no movement in the waveform at all. It's like, what the hell's going on here? And that's not good. And it's all because of volume. My record is louder than your record. It's another one of those, ego things again. But I'm glad to see that that's kind of going away now, right? But, talking about Sonic Boom and Monster, I think that they are very much sister records. They do hold a lot of similarities. Paul Stanley being the main reason that they're sister records. Like you said, he's the main filter of it. He's the one who has to final say on everything. Also, Greg Collins being involved in both is another similarity why they might sound the way they sound after everything's said and done. But I wouldn't totally throw him totally under the bus. Let's see what happens later, because he has done, I'm sure he can do better than what he's done with those guys. And I still would like to give him a chance and see if he can maybe, improve on what he's done. Let's just put it that way.
Who Greg Collins?
Yeah.
Redeem himself. He's had three strikes, right? Because didn't he do the re-recordings as well in 27?
Yeah, but the re-recordings I didn't have so much of an issue with. They are what they were. They were just done because they wanted to put their music on a pinball machine and wanted to retain the rights to everything. So that's really what it was all about, right? So I'm just talking about like major releases in my eyes, right? So, but that's they had to be done, those records. If they weren't done, they wouldn't be any forward motion with Kiss. And would there be anything? Would we have another record coming now? Who knows, right? Not to say that Kiss would never tour again if they didn't make those records. I'm sure they'd still be touring on the back catalog, obviously, right? So, but I'm just curious. Ken, did we have your thought on these two yet, or?
Oh yeah, well, I agree. I agree. Sonic Boom and Monster, I kind of agree. They're sister albums. I think I wrote it. Actually, I did write it down, so I have to agree. So even though the sound is different, like you said, the production, even the songs style is different on these albums, because Sonic Boom is going for the old, trying to reach back and get to the classic Kiss style of writing. Gene has some rewrites and stuff from old stuff he had on there, and then Tommy Thayer's redoing Ace licks on Sonic Boom. So
he's redoing Bruce Kulick licks on Sonic Boom as well, and Vinnie Vincent licks.
Right, and whereas Monster, he's kind of into his own finally, and doing his own licks, which are good. So, but I put it down on the sister album.
Yeah. And
because
did your backbone slip? Because of course that was recycled. Right now. That was recycled on both of those, wasn't it? That phrase.
That's right.
Mark, I have a question. I have a question for you, Mark. Actually, and just to go off on a quick tangent, in the studios that you've worked with, and maybe in your own, you may have an app for that. Do you have an oscilloscope? To watch the waveforms? Because when I go into the studio and have an engineer transfer rare audio, one of the first things he's doing is actually looking at the wave, going through the oscilloscope to actually measure and tweak and adjust mainly the position of the heads on whether it's multi-track tape or even a cassette tape, that he's totally dialing that in. And that seems to be a lost art. When we're talking about Sonic Boom being brick-walled, was no one looking at wave? And that's something that really bothered me, because it was around that time that I came out that I was in the studio getting some stuff transferred, and the engineer's giving me a hour-long lecture about what he's doing to dial it in.
Yeah, well, I mean, all the studios I've ever gone to, they've been doing that. Yeah, then they do it. I mean, I remember when I went to the Lacquer channel when we got one of our EPs done, we had the very fantastic George Graves master our record for us. He did a Farewell to Kings for Rush and a few other high quality records, and it was great talking to him and listening to stories about Geddy and the guys and the stuff like that. So it was amazing, you can imagine, for someone like me. But he was always saying that, and he was always, when you mention the very thought of brick walling, even then to him, because I think this is in 2005 or 6 when I went and saw him, he was very upset about it. The whole, I don't understand that engineers are doing this, because he thinks that it's within the engineer's right, especially if you have a name like someone like him or someone like Robert Ludwig, or these kind of people who have names power, to kind of put their foot down a bit and say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I don't want my name attached to some brick-walled sausage waveform. I want it to sound good, and I want it to sound good for you guys. You know what I mean? And I think that engineers got pressured by bands and by labels to say, listen, Joe Blow's record last week on the radio was, 2 decibels louder than ours, and we can't have that. You know what I mean? So I think that that is something that went way out of control. And yeah, I make sure that when I do my stuff, I on Pro Tools, when you render a file, when you're done doing a mix, you can have it in real time come up as it's being put down, and you can see the waveform as it's being done. And if I ever see anything where it starts going square on me, boom, that's it. Because I don't want that. I mean, I want dynamic. I want when a part goes down that there's a little bit of a bring down. When it comes back up, I want it to hit hard. But, if you square it, there's no
texture.
There's no showing in that, at all. So I think that it's very important to keep that in mind. And I can say with some degree of certainty that I know that there's been a turn back into keeping an eye on that a little bit more now than they did in past years.
No, there should be a Hippocratic oath: do no harm to audio.
Exactly.
So where were we?
Well, I was gonna just put up my one other one that I had for
covered all mine,
sister.
So.
The one other sister record I had, and I don't know what you guys are gonna think about this one, but let me explain. Is I was gonna put Creatures and Revenge together as records, because what I found was interesting with that is that they were both, again, records that were very important in certain stages. Like Creatures was the comeback record, a big we're back and we're here, we're making the rock record. Whereas Revenge was sort of the same thing, where they were, hyping it up that, after the kind of success of Hot in the Shade in terms of they had a decent single and the tour did pretty well, they were going to come back, guns blazing, leather back on and stuff like that. And both of them came out. Both of them lots of people liked, but the tours never reflected that that we have now years later for them. You know what I mean? Like Creatures, we talk about Creatures now, but you look in the history books, like in Julian's fantastic books about the tours, and even like the Kiss Alive books and stuff, those tours are telling. There were lots of cancellations, poor attendance. The same with the Alive 3. Alive 3, how many shows got canceled on that? They actually had to stop the tour, if I'm not mistaken, because I think Paul Stanley said it's one thing to not make money, but it's another thing to lose money, right? So I think those two are sisters in that way. And, sonically, I think they're related too. They're very hard-hitting. Ezrin made that a really hard-hitting. It's Bruce Kulick's best sonic-sounding record, easily, Revenge. I think he did a fantastic job on solos and the tones that he got. And I think it's probably, and believe it or not, you're not hearing things. You can hit your headphones to make sure you're hearing things correctly. Bob Ezrin did a good job on Revenge for production. Okay, so I will give him that, and I think that, that's where they're kind of related too. They were sonically, they were big records. They did a lot of good work on them to make them sound good, but for whatever reason, when they first came out, they were sort of met with by the people, and just years later, people talking about them. Like, look at Lonnie, he's just like in love with the thing. He probably sleeps with a copy of Revenge under his pillow or something, So, it's funny how
that's his asylum. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I've got a copy of Asylum under my pillow.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's funny how we look at records years later than we did when they first came out. There's a weird mystery with that.
Yeah, both of those are failures. I mean, if you think of it, how long did it take for Creatures to go gold? How long, Revenge certainly failed in everything that they set out for it. I mean, they were setting out goals just like they had with The Elder, and it didn't attain any of those goals other than being a fantastic sounding record that attempted to, reconnect them with the 14-year-old fan base that had been a popular, kind of demographic for them previously with, the lyrics and the songs and the titty bars and all the shit that, it's just so contrived. And that's what makes me not like it in so many ways. But it's just a gloriously, done piece of recording, and art. I accept it for what it is. I don't like it for what it is. I was kind of past it at that point, but it's still very well done. It's an album I can appreciate now more than I could back then. Just like Creatures was an attempt at a big bombastic statement which, they're both statement albums. So from that perspective, I totally agree.
They're both they're both solid albums and solid, Gene songs wise. They're both very solid for Gene, and both albums had the lead off singles were Gene songs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is another comparison, I guess you can put in there. And they both had that. They both had a ballad from Paul Stanley on those two albums. So there is similarities there, and they're both really good too. I mean, Revenge is pretty high up there for me. Not as high as Creatures, but it's pretty high.
I'm sorry, it's down with Crazy Nights for me. But
oh no, that's too far down. That's no way.
So sister albums. Any last ones to mention before I mention my very last one, which will be very brief? Ken, did we hit all 6 of yours? I think you mentioned that you had.
Yeah, you hit all 6 because we had that one which was the same. So
all right, well,
I'm done.
I'm going to put the cherry on the top of the cake here, I think, or not, because of course, as being Kiss fans, our opinions can change in 5 minutes, which is nice. It keeps these podcasts fresh. We don't have to agree with what we said 5 minutes ago or in the last episode. But here's my ultimate sister albums, and it's Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, plus Crazy Nights, Hot in the Shade. 2 pairs of albums, that are complete overreactions to each other. So you go in with Destroyer, and you have an oh shit, and go 180 degrees to Rock and Roll Over, which is just hard rock. You go from art rock to hard rock because we don't know what the fuck we just did. Then you go into Crazy Nights, and you have a highly polished, calculated piece of album that doesn't work, that is a complete failure, and you do a 180 and basically release demos for your next one. So you have 2 complete overreactions that makes them kind of sisters to me. And that was kind of one that I guess it's a bit of a stretch in some ways to drag it out into 4 albums. But, Kiss is a band that kind of overreacts in so many ways. They scare themselves sometimes. They scare themselves shitless. They do something like Revenge, and then they got to go. Lurch. I mean, we've said it on the show already. They kind of stagger forward and, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So, very Kiss.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I like that. I think it's interesting. I didn't think about it in that way, that the overreaction, which is so true.
Have a couple of beers, and you never know where you're going to think.
But they did the overreaction. Well, they did the reaction, which the good reaction, going from Elder to, Creatures. So that's one way.
Yeah, and some of those sister albums, they're kind of like the red-haired stepchilds. Elder to Creatures is another sort of 180 from the oh shit, what did we just do into now we got to do what we really should have done in the first place.
Well, what is Carnival of Souls then?
A mistake. A mistake.
I don't know what it is.
That was just their very own Elder that they just have to own.
They should have aborted that one.
Carnival of Souls in so many ways is like Crazy Nights. Crazy Nights is trying to be Bon Jovi. Carnival of Souls is trying to be Alice in Chains. It's just trying to copy trends instead of subtly steal. If you steal elements without stealing wholesale. I mean, if you take, I'm going to start speaking like Gene Simmons in a minute. I mean, God help me, but you steal the whole hog, then you got a pig in the room, or is that Paul Stanley? All right, let's wrap this one up. For all you folks who have made it to this point in the show, we appreciate you listening to us as we've gone off on a few tangents today. But, the essence of this show has been about sister albums. Which albums do you think are really sister albums in any of the ways that we've kind of defined it today? Ken's, sequential albums, they've followed one another and they're kind of partnered together, or kind of the way Mark and I have looked at it, and albums that are just so similar spanning the years. Or do you have a different way of measuring it, that you can partner up albums across the catalog in some different way? We'd love to hear your opinions on not only what we've said, but also different ways of looking at the topic. So, join us on Facebook, on the FAQ message board, wherever you happen to listen to this show, and chime in with your opinion. We always like to have a conversation where possible. Also, chime in on the little bit of the segment about Gene Simmons and the recording industry, as that's a goodie that just won't go away and never will. So we do appreciate you listening to us, and we certainly hope we haven't done any damage to your brain. So we hope to see you again. Thanks for now. Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we broadcast today. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.